Hey YouTube, it's JP Dillon, aka Jordan Peer, your vintage audio enthusiast, with another repair video. Sorry it's been a while, but nevertheless we have a 1978 Pioneer sx-580, which was their base model for the series. No frills, it's about maybe 20 watts a channel. And as you can see, it's kind of in rough shape, it's a little dirty looking. But we're going to get it serviced. And so I'm going to show you all the ins and outs of a 580 so that if you have one of these things or pick one of these up, you have a better understanding as to what to do. So the first thing you want to do is begin by removing the two screws on each side, two on the right and two on the left. We'll get the cover off and we'll take a look inside. So here's what you're seeing with the top off. You've got your power transformer, regulated power supply, fuse for the lamps, tuner board. I'll explain why that's skewed in a little bit. Down here is your power amplifier modules, one of which has already been replaced. We can see that it's got an ECG part number. The original is the STK 0029. You can use a 0039 if you'd like. There's also modifications on DIY audio that allow you to do a discrete output stage using two Darlington devices, like a TIP30 and 31, something like that. So the first thing you want to do, those there are your output fuses, and those protect the speakers from death in the event of a DC offset. I believe they're 2.5 or 3 amp on this model, not sure. So get your meter and check those. Also, back here tucked away, I don't know if you can really see it, but that little fusible resistor down there, which I believe is a 33 ohm. I don't remember. Let's see if I can get the camera to focus in it. Anyway, the little blue fusible resistor guy commonly opens, which will cause an offset in both channels. Make sure to check that. I believe it's either a 22 or a 33 ohm resistor. Don't remember. Consult your service manual. The other things that commonly go wrong are just plainly dirty switches, noisy controls. The lamps are 8 volt 300 milliampere wedge type. I think it's like a T5 is the type. Anyway, Duojo, or Dave Wojnarowski, however you know him, is the lamp guy that can provide these. So what I'm going to do is dust out the chassis. We're going to take the bottom cover off, and I'll show you what to look for on the bottom as far as maintenance. Alright, so if you take off the bottom cover, this is what you're expecting to see. Back at the back here, where the regulator is, note the board discoloration. You can see there are some crummy solder joints there on that regulator that need to be touched up. Just take a quick look around. Make sure there's nothing that stands out at you. Rarely ever does the tuner and phono section need anything. Likewise, you won't find much over here that goes bad. It's not to where you get to about the 780 that you start to see chronic problems over in the power supply and amplifier. So what we're going to do is some solder work over here in this area. We're going to check that resistor in the back and see if it's still alive or not, and if not, replace it. Then we'll chemically treat the switches and controls and test the machine. And if it works, then we'll proceed to clean it up and make it look nice. Okay, hopefully you guys can see this here. I'm going to take my soldering iron and go over these weak spots here. They're just components that nominally run hot, so over the span of 30 plus years, the solder crystallizes from thermal expansion and contraction repeatedly. Sorry if I'm moving things. I got the camera in close proximity to where I'm working, so if I bump it, I apologize. Alright. So let's flip it over and see where that resistor is in correspondence to the board. We can see, looking down from above, that the fusible link in question at the back here is part of a row of 3 things, it being closest to the back. And the only thing closer to the back would be the fuse holder. So let's get our meter and check and see what that resistor is. Or better yet, since it's accessible from the top, I can just do that too. It's a 33 ohm resistor. We're showing 34.5, so it's still alive. Alright, let's hook it up to some speakers and see what it does after we treat the switches and controls, which I'll give you some pointers on. And before I do that, you guys wanted the explanation about the crooked tuner. The tuner is skewed because of a tendency for the flywheel to come off. As you're turning the flywheel back and forth, the swaging here will pop loose and the drum will want to come out this way, which will nominally decouple the flywheel from the tuner, and if the little key piece falls out here, it's a nightmare. So this model and the 680, you'll see that, where the tuner's skewed a little bit counterclockwise to keep the flywheel on here. I've never seen them come off. I don't remember if it's that way with the 780, but with the higher level models, it's still true. And on some cases, like a 1080 I worked on recently, I had to fabricate a little piece of aluminum with a ball bearing to fit into the hole of the flywheel here to keep it here as it rotates. But you won't likely see that with these. So let's get this in a position where we can aux the thing, and I'll show you the best way to do it. Now on this set, everything is best reached from the back of the machine. And as we go down in here, you can see that the potentiometers are pretty accessible. You can use the little vent holes on top of those switches there to get the aux into. The selector switch has entry points here at the side, and also you can use the little tiny vent hole there if you're good with the straw. And then don't neglect the little loudness button over here in the corner, which is going to be hard to see, but you can see it lurking there. You'll want to get that too. And then the volume control and the touchy little balance control next to it. So what I found the best way to do this is to make a double straw for your deoxit can. You can see I'm just merging 2 straws here with shrink tubing, and that will help you get into the tight places that you need to in a situation like this to make it easy for you. So let me get the camera up on the lamp again and you can see how it works in action. Okay, so you can see I have this curved downwards. We're going to put some on the little vents of the push buttons here. As far as getting it into the pots, just rotate it 180 degrees so that the spout is pointing up. And then your selector switch from here. And we'll flip it back over again. And on the balance control, you can go down through the vent in the top, as well as the volume control. And there we go. So we got the aux in there. Let's flip it around. And let's work everything. With the controls, you want to turn them about maybe 20 or 30 times. Obviously, if you've got a particularly touchy one, do it until it clears up. But you get the idea. This is the boring part, so I'll skip over this one. Okay, so now that we got all the switches and controls cleaned up, I've got this hooked up to a load. We've got an 8 ohm load box consisting of two 300 watt 8 ohm resistors. And I'm using a signal generator here, my trusty old leader. And I'm going to hook the scope up to the load. Okay. So I got the load hooked up there. Let's attach our ground to the chassis. And let's do about a 700 cycle sine wave. We got it plugged in. Let's turn it on and see what happens. And let's select auxiliary. That's where I got it plugged in. And you can see that we got a signal. Pretty low noise. Let's turn down the sensitivity a little. We have an oscillation. And it happens to be on the positive half waveform. And as we increase in power, it goes up. Okay. Now on the 580 and the 680, one cause of this is poor grounds. And the grounds for the entire bus are on the bottom of the heatsink here. So take your screwdriver and make sure that they're tight. Put lock washers underneath them too if you'd like, or use Loctite. That one was really loose. Okay, and there's another one at the back here that's on the opposite side, so we'll do that one too. Basically, any screw point that has a little metal donut around it is a ground point. So let's go back here. That one was super loose. Oh, that one's stripped. Interesting. So if that screw's stripped, we need to get that out of there and get a better one in. Let's try using a machine screw instead. Okay, so now I've got a machine screw in there with a lock nut right at the back there. You can see that. So that definitely, since that was so freaking loose, that's probably the reason why we're getting oscillation problems. So the last thing to do, obviously, is to turn it back on and see what happens. And our oscillation's gone now. You see that nice clean sine wave there. So let's ramp it up and run it to clipping. Pretty symmetrical. The bottom half clips a little bit before. More so in the right channel than the left. So that could just suggest that the power amp module really isn't that great. That's probably the one that was replaced. So let's back it off just a hair. We're going to turn it up all the way to avoid any possible nonlinearities in the volume control. Run it up to clipping again. Back it off until it stops. And let's get a meter and see what RMS voltage it's doing. According to the meter, we've got 13.38 RMS AC on the right and 13.59 on the left. We'll use the lesser of the two to calculate. So that's roughly 22 watts per channel, continuous output into 8 ohms. I'm not sure if I trust this design with a 4 ohm load, but manual says it can do it. So now that you've validated that it's working properly out of both sides, let's clean it up. And on this set, really all you have to do is pull the knobs off. like so. Balance one's always fidgety. And there's hex nuts here and 2 screws up top. Once you get those off, more or less just kind of comes loose on you, and you can take it off. Windex is a great way to get rid of most of the scuzz off. If you've got nasty cigarette tar or something like that, soak it overnight in Dawn. But don't be surprised if the glue that holds the scutcheon pieces on comes off too, which is remediable. But most of the time, a little bit of Dawn just works without taking the glue off. Camera keeps trying to refocus and it's bugging me. Okay, so that comes off like so. You can take a natural bristle brush and dust behind here, taking note not to snap off your dial pointer. Now for your faceplate, again, Windex is nice and simple. If you've got little spottings and stuff in the clear coat like this one does that are not dirt related, I don't think these are dirt related because they have abrasions to them, you can use the Novus plastic polish to buff out the clear coat enough to where it usually goes away, which is what we're going to do with this one. And in the meantime, I'm going to take these knobs and sink them in an ultrasonic cleaner with Windex solution to clean them up, and then we'll reassemble it and see how pretty it looks. Now, if you've got a machine that's lived near the ocean, like this one has, you'll often see that the poor little knob covers will get corroded. You can try using an emery cloth or something like that in combination with some Deox Shield S5, get all that corrosion off. We might do that with these just because it looks kind of crummy. But I really don't have great ideas as to getting corrosion off plastic knobs like that are plated. Maybe you guys do. Anyway, if you want to, post it in the comments. I'm always open to more suggestions. So let's get this thing cleaned up and put back together. And we'll change the lamps out, which is pretty simple. If you want to change the lamps on an 80 series, press on one of the clips with your thumb until it loosens. And then just kind of finagle it out of the socket. Like so. The lamp's just unplugged. So if you missed that, press with your thumbnail until it releases. Finagle it out of the socket. And the lamp just pulls out. Wiggle, 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 wiggle. It's hard to do this with one hand, but it can be done. And again, Duojo sells replacement lamps. If yours are old and yellow and brittle, these tabs are probably going to break off, in which case you can use a tiny little bit of silicone sealer to hold it up there while it dries. So let's get to work and getting this thing all spiffied up. Okie dokie, we got our faceplate all cleaned up and our knobs cleaned, so let's put everything back together. Slide the faceplate on there and put your hex nuts on. Come on. Don't try to fight it. You can see now that between the cleaning and the Novus, all but the really nasty spots are gone. Like this one's pretty bad. But otherwise they clean up really good. This trick works on Pioneers, but it doesn't really work on a lot of other things like Marances and stuff that have a rough brushed faceplate rather than a clear coated one. Now when putting your knobs back on, obviously the tuner one doesn't have a pointer mark on it or anything, so it really doesn't matter too much. You just kind of push it on until it goes on. And that's that. As far as your balance, obviously just make sure that the control's centered and key it so that the little pointer faces up as possible. It's never going to be perfect. Keying your volume control, turn it all the way down. And key it up with a little minimum there. Pick an arbitrary function there. And put that there. The tone controls, you can key it 5. 1, 2, 3, 4, 5 is up. 1, 2, 3, 4, 5. And check through your rotation just to be sure. This one checks out. And we got our nice signal there. Now, let's check and see. It looks like the tuner's pretty sensitive, although it does need to be cleaned. Let me hook something up so you can hear what a dirty tuner sounds like. So that's a pretty dirty tuner. There's a really easy way to clean that. I like to use the D5 pump spray because it gives you a lot more control. You want to turn your tuner down to the minimum frequency, or maximum capacitance. And then what you want to do, let's see if I can zoom in here so you can get a better view as to what's going on. So at the edge of the tuner, there's a ground strap here. There's one here, and one here, and one at the other end. And they get oxidized. The reason why you use the pump is because if you don't, you'll get the deox cleaner all over the fins, and that will change the capacitance of the tuner and how it works, and it will make it almost unusable. So just apply a little bit, and then after you've done that, work the tuner back and forth a bunch of times, and that should clean things up. We can hear that the bearing in that flywheel kind of sucks. And it may be wise to take a Q-tip and wipe the excess off after you've done maybe 10 or 15 repetitions. Obviously, if there's any fuzz or whatever, you can also brush that out. So let's get a Q-tip. Excuse the shakes here. And then we'll wipe away the excess with the Q-tip. Now let's try.
We're not allowed to leave until financing.
Much better. Okay. So really, this thing's all set to get buttoned back up again. We got our new lamps in there. Got everything cleaned up and working properly. So this was a good video on how to do a basic service on an sx-580. The same can apply to the 680 because most of what's true of the 580 is also in the 680. As far as the power supply, grounding, and all that sort of thing. So hope you guys found this useful, and when I get some more time, more videos to come. Thanks for watching.